At this point, I would like to give you a demo in how we could create quickly an upholstered cushioning on top of our object. Before we do this, I would rotate this one back so that is actually nicely oriented and our chair is back at its original vertical and horizontal orientation. The main reason again I did this, it is simpler to work with it. Okay, so I will introduce you now to the subdivision surface modifier, which will create very nice and soft surfaces. So to start, we can say Shift S, cursor to center. Because my object mirrors across the center line, I want the cursor to be there. Shift A, let's add a plane, and then we can go into edit mode. For example, select this edge, and we have point select turned on. In my case, Y, so S and Y. And for example, we can scale it, and you see, well, I scale them apart from each other. I can also snap to geometry. The easiest way is move it further apart, then hold Control, and then move it back, and then properly your mouse will snap to the first selectable geometry. Let's go to top view, and yikes, not very good. S and Y. There. That's why I should never work in 3D view. Perfect. Okay, good. Then we can press Ctrl R, make a loop cut along this direction. So I move my mouse over this edge or this edge, left mouse button click 0 and enter. And then I can select these 2 points, X, and delete the vertices. Leave edit mode, so go into object mode, and now I will move this one up and move it over. And I also did this by making use of the snapping. There. Okay. We are working with a soft upholstery material, so we only have to model it so it sits roughly above it. Don't make it too technical perfect because it's a deformable material. You don't want to make upholstery stuff look also made out of steels in terms of precision, because then it simply doesn't look very realistic. So step 2 now, we go into edit mode, select everything, press E, and then we can press Z and move this one up and maybe snap to something at the height. I will go to side view so that I can eyeball roughly the position there. Good. And when you rotate your view, maybe you want to see something like this. Looks like these 2 surfaces are intersecting. That's correct. The next step, E and X. We bring this one over. And then E and Z. Can, for example, with the Control key, snap to the height. And then we can bring this one over there. Or because we are now in a side view, we can also just press G and maybe position it a little bit there. Perfect. Let's zoom down to here because we see there's a problem. I had this one selected, and then when I zoom in, I do not see what I have selected. So I always, before I select something new, press A to deselect what I have, press then B, and then I can select those points. So you see, this way I make sure nothing else got selected. So from a side view, I slide this one back to there. Okay, perfect. Good. So this should be the cushioning, and cushioning has a thickness, so we need a thickness. Let's go to Modifier, Solidify, and let's take a look at the side. If we leave Edit mode, you will see the direction it grows. So the Solidify modifier has, for example, a thickness. Maybe we can type in 1 inch, even thickness, high quality normals. And then here's an offset. So for example, -1 and 1. So what does this mean? Basically, you can offset in either to the left or to the right side. And how does the software know what's left and right? When we select everything or just a face, and then we go to normals and say, show me the normals, go to side view. You see in edit mode actually these blue lines. That means the face is looking towards where the blue lines face, so the normals. And that means this face is actually the front and this is the back. So fronts, and these are all the backs. And the front is always positive, so 1, and the backs are always negative, -1. And that's all behind it. Now we can turn this off again. Okay. So we want to make this nice and soft. Add modifier and welcome subdivision surfaces. Let's go to shaded view or solid view, and you see now that actually our interesting block of foam got turned into something like this. So what does the subdivision surface modifier do? Essentially, as you can see, it takes geometry and then in a linear fashion facetates it and softens it. So if I do it one more time and one more time, you see the segments are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So there are a lot of faces. And the nice thing about subdivision surface modifier is I have a high resolution object while I only have to deal modeling wise with a low resolution data set. So this is my low res cage, and then this is the interactively generated high res mesh body. Okay, there are a few rules to keep in mind. Common mistake number 1, to make everything look nice and soft and smooth, students set it to 6. For one single object, that's okay, but if we zoom in more, we can still see that everything is actually faceted. Just the faces are so small that it looks nice and soft. And the amount of faces, as you can see, grows a lot. So never really use 6. If you want to have something nice and smooth, we can maybe work with 3. Now here you see this is slightly faceted, so in this case maybe 4. And then we can go to shading and say, shade this one please. Smooth, AA, so select everything there. Or in object mode, it's flat and smooth for the whole object. There, perfect. You can also turn this one on. What this basically does is it simplifies the display a little bit. Good. So that's basically subdivision surface in a nutshell. There's also a simple model. Basically what this does is it just creates all the additional faces, but it doesn't soften the design. With the subdivision Cutmore-Clark, it does it. Good. To work a little bit faster, I keep this at 3. Also, before we continue, here in Blender, because it is polygon based, to get something softer, we have to increase the amount of subdivisions for the view. Render layers, for example, the amount of subdivisions we want to use when rendering. In rendering, we can always keep this a tick higher than view, but when we bring this over to Fusion, we do not have something like this. Then we only have something like blocky or super soft, because Fusion uses a different approach to softening the surfaces, which is actually more mathematically perfect and smooth. Which is the reason why in Blender, when we bring something over to Fusion later, we don't really need to work with very high subdivisions. With something like this, we can preview how the shape is, and then later we know in Fusion it will be perfect anyway. So there's never a need to do a view of level 6. Okay, good. So next step, that would be step 4. Step 3 was the modifiers. How do we get this one to flow nicely over our very linear looking wood construction? Well, the problem is we only have this edge, then we have this edge, and this edge. And you see it, we can just draw a nice smooth line. So we need actually more edges. So we can create some loop cuts. So Control R, click on this edge, and you see the moment we slide this one up, the top sharpens, and the moment when I move my mouse down, the bottom sharpens. So the closer loop cuts get, the sharper. Don't put them perfectly together. Keep a little bit at distance. And then Control R, maybe on this one, and bring this one over. Control R here, and Control R there. Okay. Much better. Okay. So step 5 would be now sculpting this into the shape we need. Let's go to side view, and this actually looks okay. It's a little bit tight, but we can soften this a little bit. So this edge, we can maybe move back a little bit. And now here, this is a little bit tricky. I don't want to use the arrowheads to try to align this up. We will use something that's called edge sliding. So with G, we can move something. And if I press GG, then I turn into the slide. You see here, edge slide. And now I just move my mouse left and right, or up and down, and you see it slides actually on this edge, because this edge essentially has 2 points, left and right. So this point, GG, I can slide on the edge between each end. And that's the easiest way, for example, to adjust something that is at an angle. There. Let's go to here. So these points, maybe all we have to move over a little bit. You can see what's happening here. It intersects. It's not very nice. Maybe this way. Maybe we can pull this up a little bit. Trying to simulate maybe the stiffness of the material. You notice actually when I'm in this view and I press B and select everything, and the little point there doesn't show up. It's not being selected. Little trick. When you are in shaded mode, you can turn this one on. You see, then you can see the points through a mesh. And then even in orthographic view, we can nicely select them. So maybe bring this one to there. Maybe this a tick up. And maybe here, Control R. Bring this one back. Maybe to there. Trying to deform it or somehow. Not very good yet. We can sculpt this a little bit more to make this nicer. Maybe like this. This is maybe a little bit too strong. Okay. Maybe. Okay. This round edge at the top and bottom I don't really like. So we need more loop cuts. Control R and maybe go to there, and Control R and maybe go to there. So I use the planks actually as a visual helper. GG. In there. Okay, so let's say you would like this distance to be the same as this distance. We can actually display and measure the length. So when we go to the property panels, now with N we can show it. And then we go to mesh display. And then we go to length. We can zoom in. For example, this one we can turn off. There we see this is 3.5 inches. Okay, let's select this one. Now it shows us the length of this line because that is selected, and it doesn't show us the length of the line we actually would like to adjust. But that actually will pop up the moment we start the manipulation of the mesh, because we're adjusting the edge and then it shows you the distance. So GG, and then we can move this one. So when I press and hold the shift key, you see I can adjust this in really fine steps. So maybe let's say 3.5 is what I want. GG, holding the shift key. There, more zoomed in, and 3.5. Perfect. So while in Fusion, for example, we do a lot of this stuff with dimensions and then we enter it in. We don't really have this ability here, but we can still, with these tools, scale something exactly to the dimension we need. There, perfect. Okay, I would like this one to line up a little bit to this point. X, so G and X, control, and it snapped. Perfect. Now this looks a little bit better, but I don't like this big arc. I would like to have nicely rounded corners. So when we have a square, in a square we can put in a circle, or in a square we can put in a bigger arc, quarter arc. So from this view, Control R, press 2 or move the mouse wheel, press Enter, and then press Escape or 0, so we don't move these loop cuts. So you see we created 2 loop cuts at the same time. And now we can press S and Y, but make sure you have bounding box center selected. S and Y, and scale them apart. And then the trick here is to try to get 4.5. Oh, how much was it? 3.5. Okay, 3.5 for the distance. We can go to this view, A, deselect everything, B, and then drag over it to select these loops, or I can hold the shift key and then left mouse button click. Sorry, I can hold the, it's either Alt or Control based on how you set it. In my case here it's Alt, no, Control, sorry. So I hold the Control key, left mouse button click on this one. And it can be in some cases you, based on the preferences and key bindings, it is actually then the Alt key. So please try this out on your computer. Now for the next one, Shift, Control, hold it, left mouse button click. There, selected those loops. And I click not on a point, I have to click on an edge, because if I click on this edge, you see this edge defines where these 2 points are. So the software understands, hey, I want to select this loop. Okay, so 3.5, S and Y. And there we are. Perfect. So you see now that's a nice square. And we get a nice rounding. Good. We are nearly done with the modeling. So if we zoom in, you see this looks like a big ellipse. And maybe that's not what I want. I would like to have a sharper side. So going back to the problem of not having a design timeline, we have two options now. We can either go and say what we should do anyway, save, or we could say save as. But then we have version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, and later we have so many versions. What I rather would do, because I only work on this design, I press Shift D, escape, so I made a copy, and then press M and 0 and move a copy to this layer. Okay. So the main reason is now I can select this object, and it's important that solidify is actually on top and not at the bottom. And I can go to solidify and say apply, and then if I zoom in, nothing changed. But when I go into edit mode, now you see I have actually a solid now. Before I had a surface. The solidify modifier created a volume, and by clicking apply, then it created the mesh for me to manipulate. And now here I can press Ctrl R, select this edge, and maybe slide this up or down. Maybe I'll go a little bit to there. So you see, for example, now this is round, and then to the back it gets a little bit tighter. Can add another loop cut, so you see, for example, then it sharpens it. Or I can do a loop cut there. Now it looks like this. Okay. To delete a loop cut, when selected, press X, and then you could say delete edge loops, and then it's gone. I would like this one to go X edge loops, and then you have the original state. Perfect. So there is, for example, our quick upholstery part. So that looks pretty good. Maybe some adjustments. AA, S and Y. Let's scale it in a little bit there. Here maybe G and Z, we can move this up a little bit so the wood shows a tick. And yeah, what do we do up here now? So we can select this and then try to eyeball it, and you don't want to do that. So let me introduce you now to an addition to local and global. So we have this normal command. If I go into edit mode and I select a face and select this face, you see there are my normals. Can, for example, select everything, and because this is a nice and rotated blocky object, you see the Z arrow is actually 75° minus, so 15 degrees rotated to the right. And now I can slide it along that line down. Perfect. So in this case, this actually worked. So that was the quickest way. But let's say we have maybe something like this. So this is not a straight box anymore. I want to see if that's the same. Yeah, and there you can see, you might think this is still the same, but if I move this further down, you see it's not. And that's simply because you see this one face is rotated, so it actually calculates all the angles and does an average. So that's why this doesn't work. So let me show you option 2. We will create a custom orientation. All you need to do is find maybe a face or an edge that has the orientation you need, like this one. Or for example in Edge, you see pretty much the arrows face different directions color-wise, but otherwise they are exactly oriented the same way. And then we go to the property panels and we will go to transform orientations. We also have normal turned on, and then we click this plus icon. You think nothing changed, but the thing is here now we have face. So it actually selected the face with its orientation and created for you now a custom orientation or a vector. Here I can go to face and, for example, let's call this one 15 degrees, because that essentially is how much something is rotated. And you see now here, instead of global, local, or normal, I just also can select 15 degrees. See, this one can slide on that custom local orientation. And with this, I can easily select this one, and I don't have to worry about this one maybe sliding along different directions or axes. There. So now we can take a look at how we can project a fabric texture over upholstery part. When we did the wood exercise with the 2D, we just projected the texture from all 4 sides. That was pretty simple, but also there we had some limitations. And now we use actually a 3-dimensional procedural texture for generating the volume. Now with the soft cushioning we have, because it actually goes into many different directions, we can't really use actually those methods. So at this point I would like to introduce you to UV mapping. And the easiest way to explain UV mapping is basically, think about a fashion designer. They create the pattern, then they cut the fabric out, and along the seams they sew or stitch everything together. We, for example, do exactly the opposite. We build a model and then we decide where are the seams, and then we take it apart so we can glue a 2-dimensional texture over it. So the steps we have to do is, let's go into edit mode and make sure, for example, you select those edges which define all those 4 corners. There. Oops, not this one, this one. There. Okay. And then either we can press Ctrl E or mesh and then edges, and then we say mark seam. Okay, that's good. The last one, Alt or Control based on your setting on this edge, and then Shift and the variation of it. There, and nope, not this one. There. Okay, so you want to select the last loop here. Perfect. Okay, so this one, Control E and then mark seam. So what we basically gave the software now with those edges which we highlighted, we basically told the software how to cut something apart, how to unfold it. So how does this work? Let's actually open the UV image editor. Let's just click new for an exercise. Doesn't have to be anything specific. Let's zoom out. And then in 3D space, press your keys to select everything, A or B, and drag over everything. And then to unwrap, you can go to the toolbar, shading UVs, unwrap. Okay. And take a look at inside the UV editor what we have. So you see, for example, where we marked these 2 lines. You see basically here now, there we have the seam. Other way to think about it is basically when we build the box out of cardboard, we have to cut the pattern and we fold it together. Again, we're doing the opposite. We build something, then we mark the edges and we unfold it. Okay, so and we have the left and the right. So here when I press L, this is obviously everything that defines the front area. So we sit on. And then this area is actually the back surface. Okay, good. So that's basically UV unwrapping in a nutshell. There's one problem actually we have in our version, and I will show this now. So go to UV. Actually, no, let's image new, and then we actually set this blank to UV grid. And okay, perfect. So now we have this grid. Maybe here we turn this into UV grid. And for example, I think, let's see if we have to save this one. First, I will slice this, node editor, make a new material, and then Shift A coordinates, Shift A image UV, and then here there should be the UV grid. Yes, there. And this one we can turn into material preview. Ah, perfect. Good, so I want to turn off actually the edge calculation there. And let's go and see only this object. So from the back, everything looks kind of okay. Then you see the mesh or the grid, the cubes are evenly spaced. There is some noise going on because there's actually a seam between the back fabric and the sides. And if we go to here, there we see, however, there is a problem. You see kind of like, this looks three-dimensional, like it's getting smaller in space. So our UVs are actually distorted. And the main reason why the back works nice is because this is nice and rectangular. But here, if we take a look at this, you see there and it all pinches in. So that is not really ideal. So we will adjust this a little bit. So just for reference for the width, I, for example, will put this one maybe to there. And now we can start cleaning this stuff up. Also here with either Control or Alt based on your setting, we can select complete loops. So for example, when I select this loop, S, X, and 0, it's straightened. Can select this one, S, X, and 0, this is straightened. And pay attention to what happens inside the 3D view. And then G and X, and I would like to snap to vertex. So here I can snap this one to there, G and X, Control, snap this one to there. Perfect. Okay, now this looks really crazy, and that's because these points here, they're all a little bit inside. Okay, so next set of lines, including, for example, those there, S and X, G and X, and snap U, S and X, U, S and X. And for the moment I keep it. So now I have to do the same here. S, I want to select those and select those. S and X, G and X, snap, and then U, S and X is 0, S and X and 0. Perfect. Now take a look at this. This already feels much closer. There's still a little bit of noise going on, and that's because we also have those horizontal lines at crazy directions. So here, S, Y, and 0, S, Y, and 0. Just one very easy way to align them all. So sometimes these programs are very good at calculating how the UV should be unwrapped or how the UV layout should be made, and sometimes they need a little bit of extra help. Oops, that was the wrong one. There, one more time, and the last one there. Perfect. So this one here I only put down for reference purpose for the width, so now I can bring it back to there. And now take a look at this. Great. So we have actually de-stressed our UV. I got rid of all the distortions, and it looks like the squares are all nice and even. Besides there, you see this is stretched, so that is not good. Let's see where that is. Okay, that's roughly there. So you see if you select a certain part of your mesh, then it shows you the UV points inside the UV editor. So now we have to figure out what we have to do here. G and Y. Okay. This is good. Let's select this, G and Y. Okay. See, now they're all nice and good. But what's going on there? So maybe this whole thing here, G and Y. No, we have to give it more material, more height, so we can force more of the texture in there. See, when I make this very small, you see how the texture is stretched, and the main reason is check out how long this line is and how long actually this line is. So you see this is very long, and here it's very short. So basically what is in terms of image texture under this selected area will then be forced into this area, and because the sizes are different, it will look stretched. So what we have to do here is, as I did before, G and Y, simply add more pixels till this starts. No, this is too compressed. There. And then we can bring this one up and maybe scale it down a little bit there. Perfect. Good. So I think this is done. At this point, we are now ready to look for what's called a seamless and perfectly tileable fabric texture. But seamless and tileable is one thing. How well it tiles is another thing. So what does that mean? So let's go to Google, and for example we type in seamless fabric texture. Okay, let's go to images and let's take a look what we have. This image is actually already a good example to show where something feels seamless and tileable, but the problem is you see in a smaller version actually the individual tiles. So it is not very tileable. So you want to actually find materials that look very, very even. So for example, this one looks very perfect. It's tileable and it's perfectly seamless. What you want to prevent is any irregular or noticeable patterns. For example, here in the bigger one, it's harder to see, in a smaller and easier. You see there are a lot of folds and wrinkles. Here also we have some darker areas. Also here with this one, the lower area is a little bit darker, so we will see that actually later. So you want to have textures where first visually everything is nice and even, and then you want to have no patterns, no highlights or shadows, no distortions, because that will later end up in inside your rendering. So you see when we type in seamless texture, we find a lot of seamless textures, but there are not many that are really perfectly seamless. Okay, so let's see which one I will pick. I will pick one that will seam and one that will not work really well. So this, for example, I will save to the desktop. Because this one seems perfectly. And then I will pick one which maybe looks seamless like there, but it's not very seamless. Okay, great. Good. Now we can actually, in the image editor, load these textures. So there. And then here we can load this one, and then we see it. Okay, now we have a backrest that looks like a huge sock. We have to adjust the amount of tiling in this case to make it smaller. So we need a mapping node. And then there with the scale, maybe 10 or maybe 5, we can adjust how much this tiles and repeats. And here when we zoom in, you can see this is a fantastic texture. This actually fits perfectly. Great. Let's go and select the other texture. It's there. And there you already can see what I mean. These details of the image will actually stand out a lot when we start tiling the texture. Let's go really extreme 20. You see that even worse or even better. Sometimes the trick is when we try to tile it very slow, very low, but then the texture is large and huge, so that makes it look odd. So in the end, you could try to play with this as much as you want. Truth is, this texture is simply not usable. Okay, that's basically everything for the moment about how to sculpt an upholstery body, and then how we create a thickness to it, how then we start marking the seams, slice it open, unwrap it, correct the UV distortion, and then, for example, find a texture that's not only seamless, but also perfectly tileable, so you do not see the tiles.